Usually, when there is a war out there, the two sides fight about things like borders, resources, national pride, and I'm sure these things are important to those who fight. But sometimes, and actually this is very rare, a war is about something much, much deeper. A war is fought about what it means to be a human being, about what type of life we want to live. This is what I call a civilizational war or an existential war. And again, these wars are very rare. For example, World War II was such a war. Are we going to live in a world dominated by Nazis or by a free world? Or the Cold War was something like that. Are we going to live as slaves of the state, or are we going to live as free people? And I think the war that you have been fighting for the last 2 years was such an existential, a civilizational war. Because what was at the table, what was at stake, was two different meanings of what it means to be a human being, of what we are as humans, of how are we to relate to each other as human beings. So I think zooming out a bit from the conflict, the best way to understand it is to see what were the two alternatives in this war. And this is a very important question because obviously in the last 2 years, you notice that quite often you must have felt very alone as Israelis, that the world has turned its back on you. And this was tragic. But I think there's a reason for that. And the reason is that most people in the West did not understand how crucial, how critical for humanity this war was. So which were the two sides in this war? On the one side, obviously, me and you know it was not just Hamas. Hamas was just the tip of the spear. But it was something much deeper behind Hamas. And Hezbollah and Iran and the Houthis and their fifth phalanx in the Islamic communities in the West. And what was behind them was radical Islam. So the one side was radical Islam. And what is the offer that radical Islam gives in terms of what type of world we want to live in? What type of life do we want to live? And the offer they put on the table is destruction, submission, death. And they're quite open about it. It's not that you have to do deep research to figure this out. They say it openly, and they've shown it openly on October 7th for the whole world to watch lively streamed. One of your leaders some decades ago summed it up. She said, the enemies of Israel, there will not be peace until the day that they will love their children more than they want to kill your children. And didn't we saw this a few days ago in Sydney, in that horrible anti-Semitic attack? Like this attack was carried out by a father and a son. Now try to think, try to get in the head of that father that day. That father said, the vision I have for me and my kid is to take my kid to death so that we kill Jews. This is the vision he had about life. And this is what that culture celebrates. So this is the one side. I will call it the side of death, the side of destruction. Because that's what they're good at. I mean, see, for example, what happened when we gave to Hamas, the world gave a lot of money. What did they do with it? Instruments of destruction, death and tunnels. So that's the one side. What about the other side? What about Israel? What about you? You just need to take a walk by the seaside in Tel Aviv and you understand what side this is. This is a side that wants to live a good life. I mean, this city exists because some people said, we can live better as human beings. There's a better way to live life. And what are you famous for? You're famous for your life-saving technologies. You're famous for your medical innovations. And you've created a country which is basically free. It is telling people, if you come and live here, you are mostly free. You're free to use your mind to figure out what will give purpose to your life and then to go after and pursue it. And this is a civilizational, a cultural paradigm, a cultural model. And notice how different it is from the first model, the model of destruction and death. And this is what we call Western civilization. And you know, that's why I don't like when people describe this conflict that it's like the Arabs versus the Jewish state. Because you're not just the Jewish state. I mean, of course, I understand why there needs to be a Jewish state. But you're so much more than just that. I think you're doing yourself a disservice when you describe yourself just as the Jewish state. No. You are the vanguard of Western civilization. You represent the best that the Western civilization has to represent. You came to a desert, hunted, persecuted, and you turned this desert to this beautiful city, to this beautiful country. You fought time after time wars against all odds, and you won. Like, I grew up with the stories of the 300 Spartans, and the story was the Greeks are always fighting against superior opponents, and they always win. And this is what you've done. This is how you won in 48. This is how you won in 67. Like, you call it the Six-Day War. In my mind, it's a replay of Thermopylae, but this time the 300 actually won. And why did you win? Did you win because you had the backing of God? I mean, the other side also thinks that God is by their side. They can't wait to go and meet him. No, you won because you are the men and the women of the mind. Even in battle, you use this. This is why you have all this superior technology. This is why you surprise the world every now and then with these brilliant operations that you come up with. This is not because you're the chosen people. This is because you are the people of the mind. And there was one moment in this recent war that you fought that for me perfectly captures the difference of the two sides. It happened on the 15th of June during your 12-day war with Iran. And on 15th of June, Iran bombed the Weizmann Institute of Science. The Weizmann Institute of Science is a center which is dedicated to literally the expansion of life. They are treating rare diseases, they are beating cancer. And how fitting, right? The mullahs of Iran find this target to send their rockets. What they're good at is sending rockets. What you are good at is beating cancer. And by the way, kicking their ass with your rockets. Their innovation is new ways of hijacking and tunnels. Your innovation is expanding human life. And I think this says it all about the two sides in this conflict. So if we understand what is the basic nature of the two belligerents here, of Israel and of radical Islam in any expression it might have, then every other question that we have about this long conflict becomes very easy to solve. We don't have to go back to think, oh, who was here 2,000 years ago and what happened in April of 40? No, everything becomes very simple. For example, this very pressing question in many people's minds. Who deserves a state? Do the Palestinians deserve a state? And by the way, I don't know if you know, but many in the West have been asking the question, are you a legitimate state? Is Israel even a legitimate state? And since they bring up the question, let's answer it. What makes someone a legitimate state? For me, there is only one criteria. And actually, this is Ayn Rand's idea, but I find it very convincing. The key question to ask when we try to figure out who deserves a state is, what do you need this state for? What do you want to do with that state? If with your state you want to protect human life, to protect the rights of people to go on and live a good life and produce and create and let them free, then you deserve a state. This is why I think Israel is a legitimate state and you deserve a state. I'm not a Jew. I don't think God promised you a state 2,000 years ago. I don't care if he did. I still think you should have a state because you tick this very crucial box of deserving a state. You are here to protect life. You are here to protect the rights of people. Now, what about the Palestinians? Do they deserve a state? Well, the Palestinians who want to live a peaceful life, who have as the purpose of their life to build and create and produce and be happy, these people definitely deserve to live under a state that protects such rights. But how many are such Palestinians? From every evidence that we can get our hands on, there are not that many. It looks like most Palestinians have a different goal, the goal of destruction. And actually, this is not just a guess. We have historical evidence. What happened every single time the Palestinians got something like control over a territory? What did they do in Jordan? I mean, the Jordanians at some point, they were literally bombing them to get out of there. What happened in Lebanon? I mean, some of you were there and you fought. You know what happened. What did they do in West Bank? What did they do in Gaza? You know, it's funny. They have this anti-Semitic, like, oh, they kick out the Jews from everywhere. This is what I see happening with the Palestinians, that even their neighbors don't want them, because they know that their leaders and their culture is not a culture of peace, is not a culture of life. So because of what the Palestinians want to do with the state, which is to use it as a tool of war, as a tool of oppression, first of all, to their own people, I don't think we can say that they, at least at this point, deserve a state. And then many people in the West will say, oh yes, but they've been fighting for a long time for a state. They've shed their blood to have a state. Shouldn't we have sympathy for that? Well, you know who else has shed a lot of blood to have a state? The jihadists of the Islamic State. ISIS has fought very hard to have a state or a caliphate or however they call it. Does this mean that they deserve a state? And the answer is no. ISIS does not deserve a state. Why does ISIS not deserve a state? Because what they would do with that state is they would use it, again, as a tool of tyranny, as a tool of oppression. And the simple truth is, you do not have a right to a tyranny. You do not have a right to oppress other people. In the same way that you as an individual don't have a right to oppress other people, you cannot gang up with thousands of other people and say, we will form an official gang to terrorize others. You do not have a right to a dictatorship. So if ISIS hasn't got a right to a state, my question is, why does Hamas have a right to a state? And the answer is they don't. The answer is they don't. But the tragedy, among the other many tragedies that you have faced, is that very few people in the West understand this. Obviously, the fifth phalanx of the Hamas supporters doesn't understand it. But I will claim even your friends and your allies in the West don't fully understand what is at stake here. They don't fully understand what are the two sides that are fighting here. For example, I hear that Donald Trump is the best ally Israel ever had as a US president. And by process of elimination, that might be true. But even he doesn't get what he has to deal with here. He's trying to cut a deal with Hamas. He's constantly trying to cut a deal with Islamists. What does this tell me? It tells me that he does not understand what he has to deal with. He does not understand the basic nature, the basic character of one of the two belligerents here. But I don't want to end on a down note. I don't want to end on a bitter note. So I'll just end with this. I'll end actually with a personal note. And this is, we're not collectivists, but I want to say a big thank you to you as Israel. Because since October 7, you have offered me and other people like me such an inspiration. Because it's so depressing sometimes these days to live in a West that it has forgotten what it stands for. I come from the academia, and my colleagues were forever debating whether we could say that the culture that brought us the Enlightenment and skyscrapers is better than the culture that brought us forced marriages and jihad. For the intellectuals in the West, this is an open question. Who can say? So the West has forgotten what it stands for, but you have not forgotten what you stand for. So the West has abandoned you, but you have not abandoned the West. And this is, I think, why your struggle, your fight, and your grief, and your celebrations, and your victories is also our struggle. And by our, I don't mean Europeans or Christians or whites or whatever. Your struggle is the struggle of every civilized person in the world, of any creed, of any religion, of any color, gender. Because it's the struggle for life. It's the struggle for living a good life, of living life as a human beings. So you are perhaps the best, but also the last forward outpost of the left, of the West. You are the last men and women standing. You are literally guarding the Thermopylae. Again, I come back to the 300 example, because you are alone. Because everyone else in the left, they have thrown their shields and they've gone running, but you stand your ground. And you do this for all of us. So on behalf of every civilized person, I want to say thank you. And this is why, because you stand for life, this is why you have a right to exist. And this is why you should win, and this is why you will win. Thank you very much.